Do you need me to share anything? Or?
Just go onto our web channel thing. You know, our Facebook or Travision on YouTube.
Facebook or YouTube? All right.
Go to YouTube. And we'll give it a second or two. Hopefully people will come on and we'll get started.
Oh, you'd want to give it a few minutes, wouldn't you?
Well, we're live now as we speak, so
okay.
Another minute or two and people might hop along. Come on. Leo Nolan tribute to Elvis. Good afternoon, Bernard. Good lad he is.
What's that?
The young lad from Athlone, he's a great lad. And that's why I want to keep the comments in this phone here, so that way I
can. If anyone is talking, could probably ask them what it is. I mean, ask people to what needs to be.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get a couple.
What would be a good thing to do something on in the future?
Yeah.
Maybe.
I think so. Yeah, I'm sure it will. It's half now, so we'll give it another minute-ish. I think we're good for sound and all that kind of stuff. People are probably wondering, do we leave the camera on by accident by not talking? But I think we're okay for a minute. Okay. I suppose one of the advantages of this, it's recorded. Okay, we'll get going now. We'll start. I think I've shared it. I'm sure, hopefully people might share it. We'll see what happens.
A minute.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, shall we start?
Yeah.
We recorded anyway. Okay, welcome. My name is Bernard Sweeney. I'm an Irish traveller based here in Sligo, the northwest of the Republic of Ireland. And this is a conversation, and it will be a conversation on Irish travellers and culture. Of course, there's a lot of things I'd like to add, and I probably won't. I'll start with this one at least. That I don't see myself as an ambassador for travellers. I don't see myself as a rep. And I'm most certainly not elected to speak on or above issues I wouldn't understand because they're quite complex, and so is the traveller culture. All I can speak upon is what I feel I know, what I've learned through this life. Such are the things that are quite obvious to all travellers, even if the families never met each other, they never knew each other. It wouldn't make no difference in many regards, because what was happening, and particularly around 1963, when the Irish government had set out a report into itinerancy. Our itinerancy would be another label placed upon Irish travellers. Without complicating things, we're here in 2021 and we have some of the worst health statistics in Europe. We've high levels of discrimination, high levels of the thing they call racism, segregation, assimilation. These are long words, but these words are put into actions, such as cutting travellers off from society, exclusion, taking away any means of getting an education. They would have institutionalized people into particular homes just for traveller children. And all of this process happened. These are not things that once happened and are gone away. These things are still happening in 2021, where we have apartheid laws, systems, acts that keeps travellers away, keeps us down, has special quotas. So those things still exist. Why they exist is the question and the thing that had puzzled me for a very long time. So I guess in many ways, I don't claim to be an educated person as such, that I don't have a degree or PhD. And we have a lot of travel activists that do have those such things. This is
from mainstream. There's no capitalist.
I'm not sure what your robot is saying to me, but
Sorry about that.
no, I guess what I'm trying to say in most regards is this is a very personal experience. I came from a community, a culture, an identity that has been attacked by a particular mentality for a very long time. So when I say mentality, I don't want people to feel personalized or this about blame, shame, or anything like that. The whole idea of this is to have a conversation, is to keep an open mind as best we possibly can. And all the experiences I have, I suppose, we're going through life. I didn't go into the institutions or the universities or the colleges. So I didn't get that same level of discipline that would have come with the institutions. And I was also a conflict with these institutions from day one. Out of very curiosity, I guess, when I was very young, I was trying to figure out what was wrong with the settled people. I was about 6 at the time, so you can't get really offended. But the purpose of all of this is to take away labels, remove labels, or at least start with the traveller culture label and what we call the dominant settled community. So we know there's two labels at play. And people must understand this is a very lived experience. These things are literally happening. 50% of our community do not get paid past the age of 40. Very few, I think less than 1% gets to the age of 65 or gets past 65. So these issues that are persisting now did not exist before. We may have different living conditions in different environments, but all of that might be explained in all of this. Because what has brought me through my life and got me to this point, and I couldn't have done it without a lot of other people, family, friends, people who are very dear to me in my heart, and a lot of other people. But at the same time, this was something that I was going through all of my life psychologically, because I couldn't accept, one, that our own community, our own family were falling to pieces in terms of all cultures were starting to fall in on each other. There was something happened that I couldn't possibly ever explain or can't even put into words, let alone my experiences that followed. So I'm basing this on my experience, my mentality. But it's also, I think at this stage, it'll become quite apparent that what I'm talking about is something that is a very human thing and that we all have it. So when I talk about colonization or imperialism or mentalities, I don't do it to antagonize people. I don't do it to revive history and live back there. I don't do it because we want a quick future. I do it because we live in the present, because it's in the present that you see the statistics of the past, that are our families, our communities, people that we loved and should be still with us. So when I tell you that it's also a personal thing, I couldn't emphasize that anymore. But at the same time, I know now, through my lived experiences, the bits and pieces that I've got, and the help and the support from the people that loved me when I couldn't love myself. So all of that had come together and brought me to some peace of mind, because I feel now I give up all of my life since I was a child trying to figure this out. And I believe I have to a great extent. So before I just hand over to Dylan Foley, the context of this is traveller culture mentality. So when we say settled culture and we say traveller culture, everybody recognizes there are these two cultures on the island and have been for a very long time. But if you look into the traveller culture aspect of it, traveller culture means traveller mentality. Settled culture means settled culture, because that is what cultures effectively are, mentalities and how we think and how we shape our environment and so on and so forth. But when we look at the traveller mentality taken outside, let's come outside of all the labels, black, white, brown, religion, you name it, divisions of all kinds. Just come out of it for a moment and look at these two labels, starting with the travellers and the Irish settled. Now, when we look at the traveller mentality, and not too long ago, it was called the Tinkers. So apparently the Tinkers had a mentality. Prior to that, it was itinerants. So now we had an itinerant mentality. Then before that, it was hedge people, vagrants, woods people, bogs people, and going back into the centuries. So it starts here now at the moment with Irish travellers and Irish settled, but it goes back into the centuries, all these labels. When we know, both by now, and sadly it has gotten to the stage to where we're almost psychologically destroyed, but at this stage of the game, or we can call it, that with science, we know our history, we know the path now we can. And we also have looked further into the history of things. Now, if you want history on travellers, Michael and Ella McDonough in Navan are absolutely top class. Bar top wagons, and you can name it, tinsmithing, you name it. If you want a folklore, you can get Owen Ward. If you want a comedy on serious issues, Martin Bean's Ward. If you want to listen to great singers and songwriters, and all, we have them all. Thomas McCarthy, a folklore, a storyteller, a magical man. Trish Riley, Sharon Ward, and then we've got scholarly types. We've got Cindy Joyce. If you want to know what politics life is like, talk to Eileen Flynn. We've got T.J. Hogan. There's an endless, well, it's 30,000 people overall, but an endless supply of creativity and brilliance, and each one with their own experience, lived experience, and yet together we have a shared experience. So when I speak of travel mentalities, I'm not claiming to take anyone's experiences away. I'll never get it right. It's never going to be perfect. And the reason for that is because I'm not trying to get it perfect. I'm not trying to be an historian. I'm trying to take bits of the external world, the settled mentality, and make sense of it. Because all of my life, none of it made sense. None of it made sense when they thought we were inferior, outcasts, and downcasts. We never felt inferior to anyone. And when yet we didn't feel superior to anyone. Well, back in the day when we were in conflicts, a bit different. But the moral of the story is, this isn't again about good and evil. It isn't about rich and poor. This is about two historical mentalities that have been at war for 5 centuries. And nobody's remembering or how it started. And maybe, well, they shouldn't. But there's a part of this we're outside of that. We can take a step outside of time. Our history is not the same lived history as the settled population. The settled population's history, with no disrespect, goes back about 300 or 400 years and then gets pretty much cut off into mythical, magical crossovers and other variations. It's not to take anything away from other people and their Irishness. So if you're the islander and you're the deep-rooted Irish speaker, we're not taking anything away from it. We're trying to tell you everything has been taken from us, because there's no other people on the island of Ireland who get persecuted while getting excluded. Other people might get excluded. They might get treated discriminatorily, less favorably than someone else. But nobody is going through a system and a psychological battle the way travellers are at the present moment, and have been for a very long time. This is despite fact investment, funding into support groups, NGOs, the whole lot. And yet, year after year, over the last 50, 60 years, worse our mental health got. So there's something fundamentally not right, despite all the best efforts, despite all the best well wishes and the do-gooders and the bad-doers. Something else was at play. So I'm going to bring it back inside with us. Bring it back again where we're talking about the mentalities. So this is my life, this is what I see, this is what I feel. This is what I brought together, and I couldn't have done it without other people. These words didn't come to me. I wasn't born with them. I had to get them somewhere. So I learned from good people like Dylan Foley, like John Malloy. I learned from Cindy Joyce. I learned from Thomas McCann. I learned from Martin Collins. I learned from Angela Davis to Mark Charles to Darwin to bits and pieces. but I am no expert on any of them. This is why I don't remember dates and times and places like that, because I've no interest in it. I'm outside of that looking at something that has existed for 500 years. So that's my take on it. That's what the conversation is going to be all about. Mentalities, history. And it's not better or worse up and down or anything like that. You'll see that it's a human thing. Like one of the contradictions I was growing up with was, how is it that there's two different people, yet on both sides we've got the same skin complexion, living on the same island, with the same surnames, and yet they're asking us where we came from, asking us about our culture, our identity, sometimes telling us to go back to our own country. I mean, that's mind-boggling for any age of a person to ever accept that this is just the result of something other than superior inferiority. So the history tells us it's far more complex, but also far more fun, because I'm outside that mentality. We're not from the set mentality. We can establish that beyond facts. We came from an ancient culture, an ancient land, an ancient way of thinking. It may have changed, chopped during time, but we held on to the traveler language, like an emergency survival code that kept us knowing who we were, as opposed to losing to who we didn't know. In terms of people speaking Irish, we're still getting sucked into this vacuum of colonialism. In other words, the shops, the buildings, the colleges, the universities were now the institutions of ideas. So it didn't matter who you were. Once you start going in there, it will become normalized. It will be normal. How could it not be normal? But yet there's something not quite normal in how that mentality cannot see Irish travellers before them, cannot recognize us, cannot tell the difference between how the English had treated themselves, cannot tell the difference how the Protestants had treated the Catholics, not that the Catholics were any better treating the Protestants at other times, other places in history. All mentalities are conflict. And you look back, and if you're an alien from outer space, you'll just see it's all humans fighting with each other. And you never make sense of it. So I'm not trying to be scholarly and make sense of it. So that's the tone of it. I'm sorry for ranting on, but I'm going to hand it over to my good friend Dylan Foley. He can introduce himself. And we'd like to go on record saying things like, I am Dylan Foley, an archaeologist from the settled environment, once former settled environment. And this is a swearing oath that I give and stated as facts. Or if not, we can relax to
it. To swear on it, do you know? Yeah. So I am Dylan Foley. I didn't realize I was going to have to interview. I thought this was a conversation.
How we have a conversation.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I was doing research the other day, and we found, believe it or not, and we found. I was looking at a few names of a place here in Sligo. We found a land grant by a king in the 6th or 7th century AD. And he granted land to, I think it was the King of Munster, would you believe, who defeated the King of Connacht in a battle down in Galway or Clare or something like that. And whatever happened anyway, he gave a grant of land here in Sligo, and it gave the names of it from Droichead na Martra, which is the Bridge of Martyrs, which is Ballydroichead here at Ballysadare,
Right.
along the coast. They call it Muirbach, something Rish, whatever. Anyway, it's in Irish. Out as far as the head of the mountain, basically, is what it says. And then from the sea coast to a stone called, well, the name of the thing was what was it now? Something Lugach. I can't remember the name exactly in Irish, but anyway, what it means, Al Clive Lugach, that's it. And when you translate that, it means the stone of sword swearing. So it was a place a stone that they must have used for swearing on swords or in some way, right? And this was the boundary marker of the northern point of the land that he granted, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha.
So we went looking for that then, actually, and we're talking in the 6th century. And I thought, well, that's interesting, isn't it? But I wonder, is it it's the parish of Kilmakeon. And I thought to myself, I'll have a look. And the northern point of the parish it still runs in a point. And sure enough, at the point, there's a standing stone, even now. Yeah. And I thought, it's still there. And if you check, I didn't get in to see it now, but if you check the standing stone, it says that it's just over 2 meters high. And on the left side, it has a big groove in it. Yeah. Wow. And a perforation through a hole through it. Where for centuries, they must have done some ritual. there's a well nearby as well, Tubernavian, which is the well of the warriors, and various kind of things called burnt mounds, they call them, but they're actually cooking places where people used to stop and cook boiled water and stuff like this. So they're all around that stone. So maybe 1,400 years ago or something, that grant was made. That stone's still standing, and it's a stone for swearing oaths on. But that's lost, if you know what I mean. In other words, one piece of history is sitting over the name of the stone, and its function is sitting over in one document somewhere on the internet. And then the log for it in the archaeology is sitting on another place, and the land grant is sitting on another thing. And do you know what I mean? Like, and they're not matched up. So
a lot of lost history, and it happens. We would take travelers, particularly how we're dying so young anyway. So much history is being lost, and people wonder, why do you want to preserve it? Why do you want to keep it? As I mentioned earlier, I feel there's a beginning point in all of this. So we go back through history, and again with the same surnames, you're going to find that travelers and settled were genetically one people. Not all settled people, but you might say the people with particularly the same surnames and the Irish names. So how did that happen? How did that break happen? And I think we're looking at some of the documentaries, Dylan, where they were saying that travelers had broken away in such a time away from the settled community. And that wasn't kind of making sense either. So then we started looking, well, Dylan knew a lot. I'd like Dylan talk a bit about maybe we'd say the Celtic mentality, right? People might think a Celtic people, or there was a people before here, before the Celts came. And all this might be true in many regards, but it's a bit like Christianity, how it's so vast and so big, and there's so many different fractions and dominions within that. So sometimes the Celtic culture may have flown, flown naturally onto people, a way of thinking, a way of being. And I think the Normans would have done that a lot when they came here. They integrated into the Celtic mentality because they loved it so much, and then call themselves Normans.
Yeah.
So the people who once were here a very long time are still here, but only at different labels.
Took a few battles to get them to agree to integrate.
In Sligo for a while, hadn't they?
Oh yeah, they were here a good 50, 60 years anyway, yeah.
And they had a falling out or something.
But then they lost a few battles across the country, didn't they? A big one here as well, yeah. But no, you're right. I mean, that's what I'm saying. The history, the things are scattered in various places. Now that happens anyway, naturally, a bit, but also, as you know, in Ireland it was done on purpose as well. So like even with the stone piecing together, you've got one piece over here and one piece over there and another piece over here. But one of the problems is you don't even know what bits are out. You don't know what's out there, and you don't even know what's missing, if you know what I mean. So, you know, trying to piece it together is a thing in itself, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
But genetics, as you said, genetics would have allowed us to make another go at a lot of this, because we had pieces of history everywhere, and you know, as you say, like Irish speakers might have one bit, and travellers might have another, their own history, and kept that history, and some of the settled community think that they knew this or that or whatever. It's fine, but it's different. As you said, we take into account the different histories, and obviously the official histories and that kind of stuff that changes depending on who wants to be telling the story and all that kind of thing.
I'll give you a quick example of that, because I'm looking at Will Duran, his name is, an historian.
Yeah.
I like listening to audiobook sometimes because I'm not a good reader at the best of times. But he was talking about the history of the Protestants and Catholics. And when I was growing up, when I was younger, I was like Jerry Adams, Martin McGuinness, and all these characters, because they remind me of the traveller chieftain leaders at the time, even growing up. And then, I'm quite honest, I had a like him too for M. Paisley, David Trimble. Not because I agreed with him or disagreed with him, because I was just seeing settled people anyway. It didn't make no difference to me. We were getting by both sides. So, but I kind of admired him because, of course, Mo Molan blew them all away. When Mo Molan came along the scene, I thought she was the best thing since Martin Luther King and people like that. But yeah, they had that kind of mentality, that tribal mentality, and it was over and back, over and back, over and back. When we look at the bigger picture, you see the Protestant and the Catholic conflict that was born out of colonialism also in many ways. But when they were in power, they would suppress and oppress the Catholics and believe their institutions be taught in the Protestant mentality. So when the Catholics got back in, they changed all that around and did persecute maybe the Protestants, or at least change the institutions back into Catholic again. So it's over and back. So that's something about the institutions, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, but in those cases, you're dealing with something that's in both cases. They're both coming, both things coming, ideas, or like we would have things that we would call that would be had indigenous to the country, and then we have things that aren't, if you know what I mean. And so in both cases, when you mention the word Protestant or the word Catholic, in both of those kind of things would be really they're shorthand for saying kind of like, well, it's a big subject, but power structures that come from outside in both cases. What we're calling some of the Protestants really are Protestants because they were split from Rome, but a lot of the others were the Church of England. If you want to get into that, really that's the English state. There was a good example. There was a good example just recently, actually, of the English state in action, where it's not separated from the church. So the Church of England and the English state were brought together by Henry VIII in the 1540s, which kicked off that problem. That a bit of an unusual situation, but even now there was an Irish family just recently, and some people might have seen it, trying to get 5 words of Irish put on the grave of their mother in England.
Yeah,
and they were blocked from doing it not by the Church of England priests and that, but by the actual state courts that oversee the Church of England, because they're still there to keep the clergy in line, if you know what I mean, and make sure they're loyal to the crown, essentially. So that's interesting in one sense, because that just shows you that Church of England was administered from England, and it was a part of that power structure. Now in Rome, similarly, Roman thing, again, leaving aside the religious thing, it's also a power structure, but this one administered from Rome. And so what you're describing is them both getting at it. People make out that the conflict is about religion, but I think for the ordinary people, it's never really about religion, or very rarely is. It's usually about, jobs and ordinary stuff of life and opportunities and equality and all that kind of thing. But
I kind of see it.
It's made out to be religion, but really it's about power for those at the top, isn't it? In those kind of battles, like, you know what I mean? So
I think we'll look at, say, like the Elizabethan conquest, even prior to that, how it built up. Even back then, they had the Queen or the King and Queen, or one of the other times, and they would rule the masses of people.
So I suppose if you're going to talk about this, you should really put a bit of context on it. When you're talking about mentalities and where do they come from and all that kind of thing, we'd have covered that a little bit before.
Okay, that's right, James. I keep forgetting this because I've adapted. Some of the things I'll be talking about in terms of mentalities may not necessarily match up the same as in the settled world, for that matter, or anywhere else. So I was trying to always understand the talk about mentalities, about the different mentalities, because everybody has a mentality. Every individual has a mentality. And then there's like a collective mentality, there's a cultural mentality, there's almost like a religious mentality, a nationalist mentality, and a political mentality. And it goes on like in forever and forever. But when I was thinking about this, I was trying to think, how do I narrow it down? I came across this guy called John something, and his name is not John something exactly, and it's not John Wick, but it's John something, because I can't pronounce it. And he went to the Stanford University College. And if you're watching this, John, I remember you were kind of feeling bad about one stage because you felt you had spent 20 years of your life studying what they call the limbic system, which is part of the human brain. And like everything else, complex piece of equipment, and there's various different parts. But I was listening to him, and not that I was caught up, but sometimes you pick up something, you hear something for some reason, you're trying to figure out things. So I thought that was a pretty good place to start, So I came across this guy, and he was talking about the limbic system. And there's various other parts, I forget now, the mytical hippocampus, hypothalamus, various other parts. And basically what it does, it holds all the memories, and it holds your history, and it holds your traumatization kind of almost suppressed, or whatever it might be, all your various emotions, how you think. Because when your thinking creates your feelings. And when your feelings, your emotions, and so on and so forth. So it all comes down to the limbic system. So the other part where he regretted, where he said he should have spent more time, was the part they call the frontal lobe. And that's the part, it's like a beacon. It takes in all this incoming information from all different angles. You don't even know you're taking it in. You're asleep, you're taking it in. And it's constantly working like that. And then it sends these neurons and signals back into the limbic system. that creates other parts of the body to react, like that flight or fight. And travelers will get this when I say this, because when you're grown up or any age, you're in town, you're constantly in flight mode. Around the corner, an insult, put down, going into the shop, being followed, questioned, treated. It comes because it's systematically and they suspect you constantly. So you're always in that flight mode. So all this is to do with the limbic system, and it stores all this stuff, and then it creates illnesses. And
It's 20 hours.
No, lost you, have we? All right, so is that lost now? Well, maybe Bernard will be able to rejoin there.